Welcome to a special episode of the Voice of San Diego podcast. I'm Andrew Keats. And if you haven't heard, we recently hosted an event called PolitiFest. It featured panels, discussions, debates on some of the biggest issues that voters will see on Election Day. And Election Day is quickly approaching. One of the hottest topics has to do with the future of the Mission Valley Stadium area. Voters have three choices. Measure E would direct the city to sell the land and lease some of the land to investors who promise to bring in a Major League Soccer team, to build a river park, to build thousands of homes, all situated around an entertainment district at that property. Competing with that is Measure G, which would allow the city to sell the land to San Diego State University, which has itself outlined a plan to build a new stadium, a river park, campus expansion, thousands of homes. And the third option that everybody has is to vote no on everything. Maybe after that could make way for a new formal city process that would do something different or better or similar to each of those options. So we invited supporters of each of those options to join us for a debate at PolitiFest. We had Nick Stone, who's a partner at FS Investors, the group behind Measure E, Marcela Escobar-Eck, a land use consultant that is working with them. Howard Blackson is an urban designer who represented the no on both side. Jack McGorry, who's a trustee at Cal State University and the former city manager here at the city of San Diego, is working with Measure G, as is Laura Fink, a political consultant. We figured it would be interesting if we put the debate here in your feed, and here is that debate.
Thank you all for coming. So just had a good session with the mayors, and now we'll start. We'll have a nice, friendly discussion about the future of Mission Valley. And I really appreciate everybody who's come. All right, so I'm going to start. My goal is to try to represent you all here, in the sense of that we probably, as a general public, understand about 1/100th of what these folks understand about the different plans. And so what can we do to get that up to a higher ratio? What can we do to understand things better? And if you guys all leave here better informed and just more confident about the decisions you're making, then I have succeeded. And so I will try to represent your perspective as we go through that discussion. And if somebody says something that I think is a little jargony or complicated or something, I will try to force them to answer. There's no specific, or to provide more context and explanation. There's no specific time limits on what people say, but I will work to fiercely make sure it's fair. And I also fiercely enforce an anti-droning policy. So if anybody starts to really drone, I'll come in on them. So what I'm going to do is start with a couple of statements, and these folks can tell me if I am wrong or not, and help me elaborate on that. SoccerCity, now Measure E, is a full development and specific plan for the land around and under the SDCCU stadium and the nearby property where the now empty hull of the Chargers headquarters sits. It changes city law, mandates that the city sell and lease or lease the land to a qualified group that has a connection to a soccer league. Probably these guys. Many of the benefits of the SoccerCity initiative that they're touting the most right now, the river park, the accommodations for SDSU's growth, the larger sticker price that they're committed to paying the city, are contained in side agreements with the city. The enforceability of these binding letters, as they call them, is the subject of debate I'm sure we'll get into. SoccerCity is represented today by Nick Stone. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Scott.
And that's fine. And Marcela Escobar-Eck. Welcome, Marcela.
Thank you, Scott.
Everybody got a program? If you have a program, you can look up the bona fides of everybody here. SDSU West, Measure G, is much different than Measure E. Measure G is a shorter initiative. It essentially authorizes and directs the city of San Diego to sell the land under and around SDCCU Stadium to San Diego State University. I should also, I think I clarified, but the SoccerCity initiative includes the former Chargers headquarters. It also says that the university will have to cause to be developed a riverfront park. That's it. Separately, the university has come up with a plan called SDSU Mission Valley. which is its vision for what should happen on that land should something like Measure G happen. Is that fair? Fair. It's unclear to me exactly what university academic facilities it will build on the land and when. The first phase would be a $550 million plan to build a stadium and prepare the rest of the land for development. Here to talk about that plan is Jack McGrory, trustee with California State University. Jack?
Thanks, Scott.
You can also look up him in the guide. Also to provide perspective on it is Laura Fink, who's also working with the No on E campaign. Laura, thank you. I didn't forget you, Howard. I didn't forget you. Should neither of these measures pass, it's likely that the city would have to pursue some sort of long-term process to decide what to do with that land. It could seek proposals as is. It could prepare the land itself for development and then sell or lease it. Or it could prepare a master plan and ask for submissions from firms interested in carrying it out. And here to make the case for that option is Howard Blackson. All right. Jack, was I right in how I described Measure G?
Yeah, you were pretty good.
Thanks.
All things considered, and your article on the history of the what happened, I think, was pretty close.
Okay, great.
Good.
So, what would you want people to understand about what Measure G does and what the university needs?
Well, what Measure G is was an initiative that we developed because the university had tried to work on a joint project with the FS investors, and it just didn't work out. Nick and I have gone through this a million times. It didn't work out. The university had two objectives. One was to get a Division I college football stadium to take the place of the current stadium, which is in bad shape and needs to be replaced, and two, to get land for expansion. And what the university got out of that was an undersized soccer stadium, which wasn't going to accommodate football, and Rocky Long and J.D. Wicker both agreed that this was not a good stadium for San Diego State. And we didn't get any land to expand. The university got no land to expand. They were offered 5 acres in one spot or 9 acres in another. The 5 acres was on a hill north of Friars Road, undevelopable, and 9 acres in the riparian habitat south of the river. It just wasn't going to work. So the friends, the people who are close to San Diego State, decided we could either put our eggs in one basket or develop an initiative and give the voters an alternative. And our initiative gives the voters that alternative. G is all about San Diego State. Measure E has absolutely nothing to do with San Diego State and offers San Diego State nothing. G is good. It's good for San Diego State University. The university needs to expand. How long do you want me to go?
That's good.
Okay, the university needs to expand. It's on a small 280-acre piece of land, 9 million square feet of buildings, and 35,000 students are on that piece. By comparison, UCSD is the same size university on 2,100 acres. We are landlocked, and the university to expand needs to look to expand by about 15,000 students to accommodate the growing labor demand for college graduates. And this is the only logical site for the university to expand to and to build a 35,000-seat Division I college football stadium that is joint use with soccer.
Thank you. Nick, I'm going to let you reply to anything there, but also in my description. Was that fair?
I think you were close. Let me start by trying to provide some context here. Because in fairness to Jack got involved very late in the discussion, sort of January of 2017. A lot of the history pre-Jack, he wasn't around for. We initially started this very collaboratively with San Diego State because there was a very clear problem if and only if the Chargers left would Major League Soccer be interested in San Diego. There's not enough corporate depth here for the league to be interested before that, or if the Chargers stayed. And if the Chargers left, the university was facing, at the time, a $12 million a year bill to play football in Qualcomm, now SDCCU Stadium. And the city needs housing and a tax base built on that site. It's the largest parking lot west of the Mississippi today. It's a terrible use of the land. So that was the original starting point for the collaboration. We jointly worked together very constructively in lots of meetings with the mayor. These have all been termed backroom meetings, but they weren't. They were all on his public calendar, most of them with the university and us. Where we landed was the university asking for a small amount of land on the site itself. Jack's characterization of the 5 acres and the 9 acres, that's actually mitigation land should they choose to take park. They were always going to have that land available to them on the site. But their goals kept moving. And Jack came forward post our initiative going public with a new set of objectives for the university that said we need 35 acres on the site. What we consistently heard from every source we had talked to was no near-term needs. And the very logical reason for that, they've just approved a new 11,000 student expansion on the existing campus. And the state, which is required for funding to be provided for that expansion, has said you can expand at about 125 students a year. So that's a reasonable runway. What we heard from the university at the time was we don't have anything in the near term, long term we need to expand. But it came out after our initiative went public. So what we agreed to do was to provide the university with full access to the 35 acres for long-term growth. This has been characterized by the private developers that sit on the side of Measure G as higher education versus soccer, and it is anything but. We think SoccerCity, Scott, to your point, fully provides the 35 acres that the university needs for long-term expansion. It's in a letter agreement with the city. We can talk through in specifics how that fits in perfectly to the binding commitments that are in the initiative, but also provides the housing that the city needs, saves the city $200 million in its tax base, saves the local K through 12 schools, San Diego Unified, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, actually creates a river park, and does that all quickly and without a penny of cost to taxpayers. So to your point in your description, fair market value is actually a firm commitment in our initiative. It's only a firm commitment in our initiative. It's not in Measure G. But fair market value, there is no dispute. That is what we have to pay. The mayor has the obligation to go out and independently appraise the site. He did. He came back with a number that seems awfully high to people who know anything about the site, given the environmental risk attached to it, at $83 million, and we accepted that. The same is true for the Chargers training facility at $27 million. We accepted that too. We're the only initiative that has actually committed to fair market value for the site in the documents that are provided. I think that's distinction number one. Distinction number two, to show you just how collaboratively we were working with the university, our initiative says, should we not provide a Major League Soccer team, and we therefore are not the qualified lessee, we step out of the way at the end of a year, and the university steps into our shoes and can build, just like we would, what they want there. So this characterization, again, of higher education versus soccer, that's not what happened. This is a question about which of the two private developments are better for the taxpayers, because SDSU's expansion needs of 35 acres, as stated in Jack's letter to the mayor, are met in ours, and I'm sure they're met in SDSUS.
Let me try to clarify. So you're saying in your agreements with the mayor, you have agreed to 35 acres for SDSU.
Correct.
What acreage? Is it up to them?
Any acreage that they want for 35 acres, because the university can't tell us today what they need.
And that is in a side agreement with the mayor, and you're saying that is binding, that that you couldn't somehow get out of that afterwards. And what if you disappear and somebody else gets the lease or something?
Well, so if we're not the qualified lessee, the next qualified lessee is SDSU. And it's actually in our initiative that this is binding. I mean, I can read both parts to you if you want. I'm going to do this a lot, by the way. We believe in facts. I have lots of pieces of paper with me. I'm going to just read you things from those pieces of paper. But we're also live tweeting, so feel free to follow us on Twitter, where we're tweeting the facts as we go through. It says here really clearly, nothing in any lease shall require the city to violate any existing agreements with respect to this site.
So the agreement with the mayor counts, is that?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, go ahead. Can I let Howard make a case real quick, and then?
Please, it doesn't need to be all men talking all the time.
All right, go ahead.
I just wanted to bring up my homework, which was the entire initiative. So Hope, if you wouldn't mind bringing the entire initiative up, because I don't know if you've ever seen what a 3,000-page initiative looks like, but it's pretty impressive. So here it is. Ken's got it for us. And it's in the box, so I may have to dig in there, but for every piece of paper that you see on someone's lap, there's another one that may offer up an escape clause or a contradiction. And when you cook up 3,000 pages, there's a lot of contradictory information that happens back and forth, and I'm happy to point that out. I didn't bring my notes with me, but I'm pretty familiar with some of the clauses, and so I think we can work on that. But I did want people to see that, because I've never seen an initiative, frankly, that was this long, because we know that you have to publish the initiatives in the paper before you go out and you circulate signatures, which was done. But you can imagine the likelihood of the public being able to effectively review this document is pretty low. And the ability of the FS Investors folks that Nick represents to write their own ticket is pretty high. And so I'll be talking a little bit about that and those stipulations today.
I want to still litigate that discussion about those 35 acres and the binding thing, but I do want to give Howard a chance to make the case about why we shouldn't listen to either side here.
Well, no, that's not the case that I'm making, but thank you, Scott. The case I'm making is, fellow San Diegans, if neither one of these passes, if both fail, it's okay. We're going to be okay. Too far. Not close. Far enough. Okay, thank you. Thank you. No, we're going to be just fine. We don't, this idea of the tyranny of the now, that San Diego State has got to expand, it's landlocked, it's built out. MLS will leave if they don't come to, these are false tyrannies of the now, the narrative. We don't have to make these sorts of big, very convoluted and very detailed development decisions right this second, because we were trying to replace a Chargers team that left town with a soccer team, so we didn't mitigate that loss. And then, well, of course, we need mixed-use urbanism. Well, of course, then we need a river park. Well, then, of course, we need a stadium. But the stadium's San Diego State with soccer. No, the stadium's soccer with San Diego State. They're the same sort of discussions, the same plans, but the nuances of them are now, because the development proposal that has to be made needs to meet market demands today. The BIA wants to build units today. The labor wants jobs today. The tyranny of the now and make things happen today is false. So relax. We'll be okay if and when neither of these pass.
I'll be looking at my phone because the text message questions are being curated as they get sent from your mobile devices to a moderator. Marcella, you were involved in the Liberty Station discussion when we had a large public piece of land that we wanted to develop. It did go through a public process like what he describes. The master plan was set, and then bids were made out for who would develop that.
I didn't describe that, but go ahead.
That would be something we could go through, though, in your
Please,
scenario.
yeah.
Okay. So why not do something like that?
Well, actually, I was involved in Liberty Station, as you mentioned, and the reality of Liberty Station is that it did go through a long public process, and the plans at the very end of the process looked exactly like the plans that were drafted in the beginning of the process. And I think that's where we're at today. Measure G is a ghost. Measure G is not good for San Diego. Laura's got tons of props, the prop here, the little bingo cards. They're not supported by facts. The facts of Measure G are, Measure G will potentially leave the land undeveloped for 20 years, because if Measure G passes and they can't agree on price, nobody can step into SDSU West's role except for another vote of the people. It provides for no traffic mitigation. SB 743 allows the university to not have to provide 1 inch of traffic mitigation in the valley, which is what Fenton and Sudbury allegedly are concerned about, your clients. Yet they're supporting a measure that will not provide for any traffic mitigation. And it actually mandates that the city pay with government funds for the improvement of the park, not the private developer. So Measure G will leave the land undeveloped with a $6 million obligation to the general fund every year, will not provide for any traffic mitigation, and will compel the city to pay for the river park. That's what Measure G is, a ghost. It's a ghost of an agreement. That's why this agreement is so long, not because of escape clauses, but it's long because it actually provides the assurances that it needs to provide for the public of San Diego.
All right, let's hash these out one at a time. I'm going to start with the expansion of San Diego State. We're going to go ahead and assume, for purposes of debate, that San Diego State does need to expand. If we assume that, what is not accommodated in SoccerCity's plan with the 35 acres or the other different things? So either Laura.
Well, first of all, we have to go back to what you already started to talk about. The 35 acres is not in their initiative. They have wallpapered the mayor's office with hollow offers to try to cure the deficiencies in their initiative once they got caught. So they offered San Diego State 35 acres in 20 years, and we said, well, how much is that going to cost per acre? Well, in current dollars, this is their chart, $13 million an acre. That is a joke. I mean, nobody in their right mind would pay $13 million an acre for that land. And again, these letters are just hollow paper. Let me just say one other thing.
At least we have letters, Jack.
On the Board of Trustees, right, we want a public planning process with full CEQA review. That's the way
So
public
that you can
policy
get
should
out
be
of
done.
litigation.
Can I jump in here really quickly? Because one of the things that we're going to talk about minutia of land development for the next hour. But I think as a San Diegan and as someone who cares deeply about this initiative, we need to point out that this is about so much more. This is about a vision for San Diego's future for generations to come. And there's only one initiative that plans for that. There's only one initiative that has the backing of the SDSU alumni groups, of the community, of everybody from organized labor to the Chamber of Commerce, from the conservative Lincoln Club to the liberal Sierra Club. It's backed by a ton of folks. And the reason why is because it does two things. It provides educational opportunity for the future generations. And I want to tell one little story here, because I think we need to remember this as we go back and forth, because we will, about the and I'm happy to go toe to toe on them, on the specifics of the plans. But this is about educational opportunity for students that are getting shut out of SDSU, and they are right now. You know, we did a press conference a couple weeks ago, and I got to tell you, it was not hard to find students that had this opportunity. We had a father-daughter pairing, Hardig and Fernanda Flores. And Hardig worked more than 20 years at the Hotel del Coronado. He was a hotel room attendant. And his daughter, a first-generation college student, graduated from SDSU, now works for the Labor Council. That is what it's about. It's about affording these students the opportunity and creating the economic engine that will then drive jobs. And we're going to sit around and talk about land use today, but I would love for us to talk about what is the better opportunity to create that.
So let's
just
take
a
step
sec.
back.
So Voice of San Diego's many members adore land use minutia. So
I'm cool with it too, but I just wanted
so we're gonna dive right in. Jack, I do want to ask you though about this specific. What exactly about these site agreements is not enforceable? Is there a legal principle that you're?
Yeah, they're just unilateral letters that they have sent into the mayor's office that are not contract documents. They're not legal documents. They're trying to plug the holes in what they drafted. In
on
their
that specific point.
Just on that point, because then I think we can get rid of a lot of this discussion about is one good for higher education or the other.
Right.
What you haven't heard from Jack is why our land plan isn't good, because our land plans are basically the same. They copied our land plan plus or minus and put the stadium in a different place. Here is the key distinction. Two things. One, we actually have a paper document that says what we are committing to provide. Our initiative specifically incorporates that. We anticipated this. The mayor did it just like a year before on the charters, came out and asked for an additional set of concessions. We hardwired our initiative so that we could make this legally binding. Point two, Scott. When people vote on this initiative, they are voting on providing what is called legislative intent. So we now, because we have made these documents public, have to provide that in the lease to the city in order for us to comply with what people were voting on in November. We've been public with this letter for a year and a half. We have yet to hear the university come to us and say, actually, our 35 acres, we would really like you to have it look like this rather than that, because nobody can specifically say what the land use is for the university are 30 to 50 years from now. That's why this is so important. Like, the university has repeatedly said, no expansion for 20 to 80 years, including as recently as August 14th in the paper, the president of the university said, only if we get additional state tuition dollars and only if we get new tax revenue. That's the rub with this expansion in question. That's why the university can't know what they need today. Online education is radically changing the way it's delivered, and we're asking a university to think out 50 years. The private developers behind Measure G, they have a plan. This looks like private development. They've said it publicly. It will be offices. It will be housing until the university decides they want it back. Both of our initiatives for the university are the same. So can we now dismiss with the sort of, it is very valuable for higher education to have the opportunity to expand. But one more point, there's one thing Laura left off of her list. Measure G puts the students at risk for the extra cost of the stadium. It's unbelievably clear. Their own consultant has come out and admitted it. They characterize it in their plan as low, but their plan doesn't incorporate things like the first 3 games of this year, attendance at SDSU football down 18% from the first 3 games of last year, right? The average attendance for this stadium that quote-unquote doesn't fit, 25,900 people have attended the first 3 games this year. Our stadium is 33,500. Like, we are having a false debate. The one thing that is not false, the students will bear the risk of an extra $150 million worth of debt in Measure G so that a set of private developers can build something on that site.
Let me jump in real quick. So Marcel, I want to ask you about another aspect of the SoccerCity Measure E plan, which is the sort of flexibility within it. One of the great concerns that these guys brought to me when they came and talked about the issue was the concern that there could be 700,000 square feet of retail. There could be 100,000 square feet. That the initiative builds in so much flexibility into what you guys can end up developing that we have really no idea what would be developed on that land. And that because it shuts the public out of the process of influencing those decisions, we're just relying on some sort of trust in what you do to get it done.
Thank you.
So it actually, the flexibility is what's typically built into specific plans. I've been doing this for 30 years, and that's one of the things that we do. That flexibility is also tied to what the needs are. So as Nick described, part of it is the needs of the university. The flexibility is also tied to the mitigation. So it actually is going to be commensurate with the improvements that are being put in. Unlike the SDSU plan, which basically could get tied up, I mean, they've been tied up in litigation on Adobe Falls for 13 years, 18 years, I think, going through it. So the flexibility is there so that we can actually deliver something in a timely fashion. Unlike what Howard is saying, we actually should be concerned if neither one of these passes, because what happens is the general fund continues to be obligated for $6 million every year for a deteriorating facility. If both of these measures don't pass, it's a full-time consultant employment act. We should be happy. I'm not happy because as somebody who is a San Diegan who cares about seeing the site develop, that flexibility actually allows the plan to move forward so the voters do know what's in there. We know what's in there. We know what the maximum development under any scenario is, and the commensurate mitigation goes with it. So all of the traffic improvements, all of the park improvements, they will go in as the plan moves forward. Unlike Measure G, again, a ghost of a plan, which has no guarantee that the park will ever be developed, but the private development will be developed without the park.
Are you comfortable with how it's laid out as far as flexibility?
No, first of all, the city of San Diego doesn't usually allow for a specic plan, so it's a new sort of planning tool for the city of San Diego.
That's not true.
It is.
We've been doing them for 30 years, Howard.
Well, you've done very few. They're mostly precise plans and they're different.
Probably 25.
And then, second of all, the issue is who benefits from this plan? Who's the actual beneficiary? They're same sort of plans as we've said, but the beneficiary is not the citizens of San Diego. And I think you need to understand this is an extraordinary time for measures where these are, Sarah Libby's written quite a bit about how measures in California have changed, and now we're sitting here talking about transferring 160 acres of public land to a private individual party to benefit from this new development. And that's not what George Marston would do. That's not what Balboa Park and Mission Bay have taught us, is where when we invest in cultural and social value, it creates tremendous economic value. And there's an opportunity to do this. But right now, because of the chargers and the dialogue of short-term economic gain, oh my gosh, $5 million is too much each year to figure out what to do with property. We better get rid of this tremendous long-term cultural asset. We're stuck in this short-term thinking.
Jack, I want to tackle this specific question about what San Diego State needs and when. There's a lot out there about, and as he just said, that basically developers will just develop this land and then the university will take it over time. And you guys have really amped up the pressure that no, we need it now, we need to expand now. What will the university build when on that land?
Well, the university, this is a completely different type of development project than what SoccerCity is offering the city. And I'm not here as a representative of the CSU Board of Trustees, but I sit on the Board of Trustees. And the state legislature and the Board of Trustees realizes now that we have to expand the entire 23 campus CSU system. A study was done by the Public Policy Institute By 2030, if we kept at our current rate of growth in the two systems, UC and CSU, we'd be 1.1 million college graduates short of what this labor force needs. We need to produce more college graduates across the system, and particularly in San Diego State. We get 100,000 applications a year for 6,000 positions to come into school. There are plenty of kids in this community that are well qualified to go to San Diego State that can't go there. And the legislature appropriated $120 million this year to expand the system. They're going to continue to make that commitment. And we need to do the same thing. 1 out of every 6 college graduates in San Diego County is a graduate of San Diego State. We have a $5.7 billion a year economic impact. We're not building a 740,000 square foot shopping center, another one in Mission Valley. We're going to build a river park with 80...
No, you're not.
Marcel, can I finish? Remember when we used to work together?
You're lying.
Yeah. We actually, planners have a hard time disciplining themselves in this process. Anyway,
Remember Mike
we're going to build
Stepner.
a river park, community parks for the community as required by the community plan. We're going to build a new 35,000-seat stadium that's self-financed. Nobody's ever mentioned student fee increases. These guys took a full-page ad out in the Daily Aztec to say that, and it's never been said by anybody that student fees will be increased. Students actually have to vote for those, and then we would build our campus, which would accommodate 15,000 students.
Okay.
So there's two areas
I'm
I want
sorry,
to get into.
I have to respond to this because as a planner, Jack, and as the architect of the ticket guarantee and the pension underfunding, you're lying. You are not going to build a river park. I'm
So let's-
sorry.
that's-
That is just
So I want
flat
to
out
I want to
lie.
litigate. I want to
The
litigate.
in the
initiative says it. The
attorney-
initiative
it's in-
just said
it's
it.
in the city
The
attorney's
state
memo.
has to cause
in
the river park to be
city-
built.
No,
All right,
it's in
so
the
hold
city
on.
attorney's memo that you're not
Let's,
going to do it.
Marcelo, hold on just a second.
Sandy's really our friend.
So I want to talk about two aspects, the financing and the river park. Let's start with the financing.
Well, Scott, before we get there,
No, hold on. So the $550 million is the initial phase of the SDSU Mission Valley project. When we requested some information about how that would be financed, there was just some uncertainty or just some lack of willingness to share about how that would be financed. What could you say is concrete about the fact that San Diego State University students would not have to bear that initial investment to prepare the land and build the stadium?
Because I'll give you an example of some of the projects that are going on now. The last 5 years, San Diego State has built $700 million worth of projects on 1 and 2 units. There weren't student fee increases involved in that. Usually it's funded by either a combination of CSU bonding capacity, on-campus revenues from tuition and state appropriations, and private grants. I was on the Campanile Foundation board for 9 years. 2 years as chair, we completed an $850 million campaign for the campus. So it's always been a combination of private fundraising, campus revenues, and the CSU bonding capacities. The largest state in the country. I mean, we've got a lot of capacity.
But let me just add
so,
something though too,
I think
because
there's a real
I just-
rub here. Yeah,
I just had
there's a
an
real
addition to-
rub here with respect to financing and plans. In actually, Voice of San Diego article from just a couple days ago, the athletic director said for their planning, we just haven't finished putting all those numbers together yet. So to say that it doesn't require student fees, there's not a plan per the athletic director, and the university's consultant said, if I'm right, the likelihood that student fees or the need for them comes into play is pretty low. Okay, so we don't have a specific plan for the financing yet. We have a plan. But the SDSU West side doesn't have a specific plan for the financing. Enrollment at SDSU is down from 10 years ago to today. It is true, the university needs to grow. That's why in May of this year, they approved an on-campus expansion for 11,000 new students. Now, we're looking at a 10-year trajectory that's down in terms of total enrollees, and 11,000 student expansion on campus right now, which means all of what we're debating is in the future. It's not got anything to do with student growth right now. It's what are your future needs? And that question Jack hasn't answered. Because what's proposed in the SDSU West plan is offices for an innovation center, which is just offices, and housing, which in both plans can work for both students and for the market. Both plans start facing the market. Both plans, therefore, are built to work for the market. We don't build office campuses that look like college campuses. So it's not a campus in SDSU West, it's an office park, which means SoccerCity can perfectly accommodate the university's long-term expansion needs because they don't need it anytime soon. They have no plan for how they're actually going to pay for the stadium that they've got under their plan already. And big picture for the university, Jack's right, $800 million endowment over a very long term. Today's endowment, $289 million. We're talking about a $250 million stadium. These are not small risks for the students to be asked to absorb, and they did it in Viejas.
Thank you. Laura?
Oh, methinks FS investors doth protest too much. I want to talk a little bit about, there's so much, because I'm in a little bit of a wind tunnel of opposition talking points here. And you know, I do have props. I have props because it's hard to keep track of all of the misinformation that's coming this way. So you have a bingo card, and there's, you know, verifiable, cited untruths. And I don't like to use the word lie because it sounds, you know, deliberate, but those are some untruths that are flying around. And I don't know where to address them, but I'm going to start with a simple one. Which is to dig up a little bit of history, and that is when SDSU and FS investors were in talks initially, they had a plan for how they were going to price the land, $13 million an acre to SDSU, and that was based on the city giving them the land for $1. And it was based on the costs that they were going to accrue both for the stadium and to pay the $150 million franchise fee for the Major League Soccer team. So that's $13 million an acre they were going to charge SDSU. Now, the other part of it, as we talk, just remember this as we talk about bonds, they were relying on SDSU to take out state bonds to finance the stadium that they had proposed. So all of this was in their negotiations. This was their offer. And now we've shifted. There's a lot of shape-shifting, that has happened over the last year. And you're seeing it kind of right before your eyes. And I know it makes it difficult, I can imagine, as an audience member and as a voter to understand that as we talk about these things. But I'll just say one more thing, Scott, and that is that it really is about who you trust. And I know that Nick has talked almost with, you know, morphing himself into a CSU trustee and as an expert in that field with what SDSU needs. Well, I'm going to do that just for 1 second, and I'm going to talk about FS investors, because FS investors counts on finding undervalued assets and capitalizing on that. That's not bad if you're a businessman or a businesswoman, but it is detrimental if we're talking about possibly the most valuable public asset and the biggest giveaway potentially in the city of San Diego.
Okay.
So I would just like everyone to think about that as we talk about the micro issues.
Quickly, Jack, and then
I
Nick
just
or
want-
Marcelo.
You're probably getting really bored, the point counterpoint. We've done this probably 50 times in the last 6 months, so some of the words just come out automatically. What I want you to think about is all of the endorsements that have been given to the Friends of San Diego State University and Prop G. Okay? The Mission Valley Planning Group has studied this for over a year. They are technically the city jurisdiction over the Mission Valley general plan, community plan, as it feeds into the city's general plan. Last Thursday, they voted unanimously, after all this study, to support Prop G and to oppose Measure E. They are in favor of the San Diego State's plan. They are opposed to theirs. This is a plan. If you see 3,000 pages like this, written unilaterally by a developer, you know you're going to get the shaft. This is the worst development agreement I have ever seen in my life. There isn't a city manager or a mayor in this country that would encourage developers to be able to write their own initiative with all the poison pills they have and stick it in front of the voters, and that would be the plan that gets adopted. If that's what we want to do, let's just do the same thing for the sports arena. Let's just let a developer come in, write their own plan, and get unlimited density, not have to mitigate for impacts, and create a disaster.
Okay, so I want to have Howard give a say, and then you guys can choose to address the financing issue one last time or the river part. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I should announce that I've actually gotten some investors to invest in me to make me a voter initiative and gather signatures.
Congratulations.
To take over Inspiration Point in Balboa Park, because it's a really crappy parking lot, and you can trust me. Trust me. I'm kidding. Because trust is important. Trust your community planning group process. There is a community planning group process going on. Our mayor has put a lot of effort into these, and we should trust that process to plan for the stadium, which would be great. Trust your representatives. Thank these people for allowing us to go from the idea that we have to replace the chargers today, which you did a very good job to, maybe it is a public place with public stuff and public in the future. The process is starting right now, the dialogue shifting, and we should trust you to make the right decisions with your city representatives at Planning Commission, at City Council, because this is public land, it's your land. So I really do appreciate the dialogue that we're having.
And we do appreciate that you trust us, and we are 100% consistent with the Mission Valley Community Plan. So let's talk about who sits on the Mission Valley Community Planning Group that just voted on it. Marco Sesa from Sudbury refused to recuse himself and led the vote. When you look at every one of the endorsements that you have, Tom Sudbury, Fenton, Marco Sesa, the Lincoln
Sierra
Club,
Club.
every single
It's the Sierra
one,
Club.
That's
This is
the
your river
that's
park.
the
They
one that you
rejected.
can point to, Jack. That's the one
That's
that you
Sierra-
can point
no,
to.
the Sierra
that
Club is a
doesn't
very
have
important endorsement.
somebody on the board that you guys gave money to.
Okay, but-
Every one of them
was
has
the-
money that you guys gave money
So,
to.
can
I just get
So
back?
we are consistent with the community plan. We're 100% consistent with it. You can laugh all you want, but let's take a look at the community plan. We're 100% consistent with it. And the votes are because their members voted on them.
Let
But
me-
Marcella,
here's-
that's only 2 members that you've named. That board was 9
How about the
people.
Chamber of
and it
Commerce?
was
You're on the
virtually
Chamber of
unanimous.
Commerce, and they voted with one
We were asked to
opposing vote.
recuse, but Tom Sudbury sat in the room.
Okay.
We were made to recuse.
I'm a swing vote.
Hold on.
Let's just
All right.
take a step back.
Yeah, I
Okay?
want to step
Everybody
back.
take a step
No, I
back.
want to step back and I want to talk about the river park because
I do
that's
too.
the most important aspect that a lot of people point to. And I'm
So
sorry,
here's-
Nick.
That's okay.
I'm going to continue with this.
The river
So-
park is a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's tackle the river park. Can we do it for both?
The river, sure. The river park. The question I have is, you guys put forward an initiative that says you'll put $40 million into a river park.
Yep.
That reverted. Hold on. Reverted to. I'm here. I got it. Thank you.
You're doing a great job, Scott.
It reverts to $20 million if you don't get it going. But again, in a side agreement with the city, you've said, no, we'll stick to $40 million. Tell me why we can trust Measure E and SoccerCity to build the river park more than we can trust SDSU, and you will get a chance to make that case.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of important answers to this. First, it is binding in our initiative, and it's binding in the specific plan, that both with respect to the financing and with respect to the timing for when the river park gets built. And I think that's an incredibly important feature. Like, I can point you to the specifics in our initiative, which says we have to build a river park. We have to spend at least $20 million, if not $40 million on a river park, and we post our concessions to the mayor in a binding letter agreement with the city, which is binding on us in the lease agreements, say we spend $40 million. It's not wallpaper. It's not some fairy promise. It is a binding letter agreement with the mayor for $40 million. And if we don't deliver,
Why not sign a contract or a lease right now?
I would love to. I have to have a negotiating counterparty, but they don't want
Why
to do
not
that
put
yet.
that in the initiative instead of making it all a side agreement? And why would
So,
you
Laura, just wait.
include-
Okay,
Yeah, let's
just wait.
finish
so
this case
let
and
me
you'll get
finish
to it.
my case for just 2 seconds, because I think the key distinction between SDSU West and SoccerCity is the river park. Now, you should know Laura's 2 clients have built out most of Mission Valley, huge swaths of Mission Valley. Mission Valley today, 46 acres underparked. People like parks. Is it any surprise to anyone that the 2 developers who funded 99.9% of No on Measure E are scared of the competition that comes from SoccerCity when we are building a $40 million, 60-acre river park on our site? No. Why is it so important for you to understand the river park question? Because this is the city attorney's words, not mine. With respect to SDSU, does the initiative require the purchaser to build the river park? No. Does the initiative require the purchaser to build the other parks? No. And how do you know that that is the case? Because there's actually a map in the back of the initiative. The SDSU West initiative specifically carves out the park acreage. Oh, you can't really see it. It specifically carves out the park acreage at the bottom of the site and leaves it with the city. So, one initiative the city attorney has looked at and definitively declared the answer to that question is no. SDSU West, the purchaser of the park, cannot be required to build it. And how do we know that that's true? Because the co-proponent of SDSU West went on KBBS, and when asked if he was going to take city funds to be able to build the river park, he said, yeah, if we can get them, why shouldn't we get them? It is on record. The city will end up funding the SDSU West River Park because that land stays as city land, and you as the voters are voting to require the city to put a park on it in 7 years. So huge distinction between the two. SoccerCity builds it. Look, if I had it to do over again, Scott, with respect to the 40 versus the 20, we put the $20 million in hoping that it would give an incentive for Laura's clients not to sue us because it would make the land that we were developing more valuable to them.
Good.
It didn't work.
Laura, and then Jack.
My clients are a pretty broad coalition, and we've listed some of the endorsements, including the Mission Valley Planning Group and all of the planning groups. But I did want to talk, and I'll hand it off to Jack to talk a little bit more about SDSU, but I did want to mention a couple things. Not only did the 40 million shrink to 20 million magically, there is one of those escape hatches that I was talking about early on, because this isn't just a prop, it does contain a lot of important language. And one of those escape hatches is that if permits are required, state permits or federal permits over the period of 18 months, then they don't have to build it, which is really nice because then you can save a lot of money that way. So that's the problem. The problem is not that the commitments aren't there. The problem is that there are these escape clauses. And I think anybody that knows anything about building, you're going to have to pull a permit. And that process is not speedy. And so when you put in these qualifications, and he's going to say I'm not right, then my question is, why'd you put it in there?
But
why did you put it in there?
So
and
Jack,
I'm going to cite one more thing, and I'll hand off to Jack. And I'm sorry, Scott. I just want to say this too. The city attorney says that there is no guarantee of a river park in the SoccerCity plan. Thank you.
So Jack, that question about the language that doesn't include the park in Measure G, and yet you're saying it's guaranteed with Measure G. What certainty can you point to that it would be caused to be developed by the university?
Well, first of all, the initiative says San Diego State University will cause the river park to be built. I don't know how you can get it any clearer than that. We're not particularly friends with the city attorney. She seems to like to sue us. These guys, talking about worrying about litigation, sued us because we used the term San Diego State University. And then we beat them in court, and they appealed it. 3 days later, we won in a court, the appellate court decision. You guys are the litigious ones. You're the hedge fund. You're in it for the profit. We have committed as the first project that San Diego State's going to do on that site is to build a river park.
Okay.
May I say something real fast?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you see how complicated this is? And you saw the box. This is not a good place to have this conversation on a ballot measure. Now, if we were going to decide what color the city flag should be, great. If we're going to decide yes or no or something, but this is complicated, and I really appreciate the professionals that are here taking care of it, but you don't have to vote for it.
So let's just read some language. In our initiative, if such permits are not obtained within 18 months, then the qualified lessee shall, at the city's option, deposit the funding for the river park with the city. So why does the city attorney say that we're not guaranteed? Because the city could actually choose to make us fund it rather than build it. The city's already said, we're going to make you build it. That's the answer for the guarantee on the river park. It's the city's option.
And what Ms. Fink didn't tell you, because she loves to leave out facts, is that this piece of information actually says it shall remain as open space until such time as construction of the park commences. It doesn't say we don't have to do it, Laura. You should really read all of those documents in that box.
So here's the problem at the end of the day.
I'm sorry, Marcella, but that can't go unanswered because I do tell the truth. The city attorney agrees with me.
Let me.
The city attorney
I am
agrees.
taking questions that are being curated at this level, and we got one that I wanted to clarify
Scott,
here.
there's one thing that. Oh, goodness.
All right, Jack, 1 minute, and then
Howard.
and then.
Marcella was involved in the Naval Training Center Liberty Station project. I signed the deed with the Secretary of Defense when the Department of Defense gave us that property, signed it way a long time ago. We formed the NTC Reuse Task Force in November of 1993, and the first building was built and opened in 2007. That's a long process. I think the voters have enough information now between your plan.
I would agree with you on that, Jack, actually.
And our plan to make an intelligent decision.
They're
and I would
both
just
against me,
ask you,
Scott.
look at all the people who have studied
against the
these
vote.
two initiatives. Every single group has come down on the side of Prop G.
All right,
People that are directly
1 minute over here, and then I get my question.
I think the argument with respect to information for Howard is twofold. One, for the last 20 years, we've been studying this site. And all of the plans look the same. They're all a stadium, a park, housing, office, retail, and hotel. All of them. In fact,
like
it's
East
in the
Village.
community plan.
Not our plan. We don't have a shopping mall.
Jack,
140,000-foot shopping mall.
I do
Another one in
understand-
Mission Valley.
I do understand
Half
that-
of them are boarded up now.
I do understand, Jack, that you don't understand retail other than a mall. It's not a mall, okay? These are getting built all over the country with great success right now. A sports entertainment district is different. Look, this is what the community plan update ran with respect to traffic loads, et cetera. Why? Because it's what the city wanted to see on this site from a density perspective. We are trying to attract the millennial customer who lives in Mission Valley to this site because the city wants people to be able to get to and from on transit. There is a logic behind this, which is why the last 15 years worth of plans look the same. So that box of information is actually transparency, because I promise you, Laura's clients have spent millions of dollars reviewing it, and what you're not hearing is specifics with respect to any of the mitigation issues.
It was so transparent they wouldn't share a copy of the initiative with San Diego State before they published it.
Well, fortunately, Scott also knows that that's not true. So, look, this is the rub with Jack coming on board late. In fairness to Jack, he wasn't there for all of those discussions. He didn't see the frequent email traffic back and forth between the two. And the reason that SDSU is not firmly in the initiative is that land transfer is by contract. The SDSU has existed for 125 years without an initiative for the purchase of land. So land transfer is by contract, which is what we propose to the university frequently. Here's a term sheet for the contract. Here's how the contract works. All of this is now noise to delay or shift who is developing this site.
Let me represent the people here for a sec. There was a question that came in that said, what is the advantage of the city gifting the selling the land to an entity like SDSU? And let me just broaden that question out to, what if I frame this decision like this? One plan, if your main concern is to get as much money into city coffers as possible, to develop the land as quickly as possible, then SoccerCity might be your option. If your priority is that the university is an important entity in San Diego, it needs to expand, there's no other land for it to expand, this is a great place, it's 3 stops away, it should be there, and we should trust the university to be a good steward of it. And you should vote for Measure G if that's your priority. And if you don't like, thank you. If you like that, that's what you do. If you like that, that's what you. If you don't like either of them, you should go with Howard. Is that fair?
Trust me.
That is exactly what's being framed here.
And so
I totally agree with you.
It's
I do
totally
too.
false framing. That's
The only problem about this is
but you get more money into the city. Would you agree?
So I think the false dichotomy in that framing is that one works for the university for its actual needs, because Jack still hasn't answered the question for what does it actually need on the site that we're not providing.
That's a good point. What are you going to actually
Say it one more time. We need to expand the university by 15,000 students to meet the needs of this labor force and this community.
Which our plan does.
Excuse me.
Our
San
plan
Diego
does.
State and UCSD and USD are the economic engines of this economy.
No question.
Our labor force needs college graduates. We need to produce more of them, and we haven't, and we're going to be way short. And by the way, San Diego State is the school of opportunity. 40% of the kids who go to San Diego State are like me, first-generation college students. Many of them come from south of 8. This is their opportunity to leave the working class, leave lower-income areas, and begin to move into the middle class. They can become professionals. They get college education.
Scott.
That's got nothing to do with building a mall, building a bunch of private office buildings, and a lousy
So
soccer
Scott, quick question for you, actually. So let's just say that the SoccerCity plan passes as we believe it will, and the SDSU West plan does not. Will the university not accept the acreage that's being offered to them? I mean, that's why you're framing.
Well, I spoke with the university president the other day.
You can't frame it that the SoccerCity plan won't give the university
fair.
the higher education, because
Okay.
it will. And that's the thing, is
It's a
when this
ridiculous
plan,
price.
I'm
Let me ask
talking
you-
to Scott
You're not
for a
in this
second.
you're in this
So
to
when this
make
plan
money.
passes, when this plan passes, the university is going to get the land from SoccerCity.
Let me clarify. Let's clarify this point. Clarify the $13 million point.
Okay.
Are you going to charge the university
No.
$13 million per
Look,
acre?
and this is, again, Jack wasn't in the room for any of these discussions. I'll tell you exactly. when the university asked for half of the land for free for us. They came to us and they said, we want half of the land here for free. So beware, voters, with respect to what an indeterminate amount for a purchase price looks like in the future. The ask of us was half of the land for free. That sheet, Jack, very specifically carves out all of the costs associated with the half of the land for free the university was asking for. And it amounts to a $350 million gift to the university. Like, we're giving them 150, but $350 million was a bridge too far.
You won't find that anywhere in their initiative.
The point
It
of
doesn't
that
exist.
sheet, Jack, the point of that sheet, and you know it because we've had this conversation back and forth and you've had it with Scott. The point of that sheet was to make clear that the ask made by the university's representative, Kit Sickles, for half of the land for free was an untenable ask. That's why that exists. Nobody's talking about 13 million an acre, and if you look at what's actually on the sheet, Jack won't show you the details.
All right.
What's actually on the sheet is like parking structures and land work and things that are real costs.
Let me ask you, I've got to wrap this up soon, but we had a text question that came in that said, what kind of public input the public can have on both plans? And I think this is an interesting point. You tout that you'll go through the California Environmental Quality Act, but in some ways that is a major hurdle that would take years and years to actually get shovels into the ground. What input can the public really count on to influence you on the California State Trustees system, that you'll actually listen to them when that process goes through?
We committed that we would go through the Mission Valley Planning Group and a public process for a normal CSU master plan. And that involves public hearings. It involves, we bring the Board of Trustees here. We would go through a normal planning process with full environmental review, including just negotiating with the city the impacts that we need to mitigate for in that process. These guys, their initiative says there will be no public hearings once the initiative is passed.
All right,
that's the
stop
end of
there.
it.
Go.
So CEQA and the state, SB 743, prohibits you, legally prohibits you. So you
and we have
it does,
committed to
Jack.
go through the process.
I'm sorry, Jack. Legally prohibits you. SB 743 does not allow the state to pay for mitigation that the city will require. Period. That's a fact. And in fact, so much so that on the Adobe Falls EIR, SDSU actually came out and said, sorry guys, we can't do any mitigation, we're legally prohibited. So yes, you're committing to go through a process that at the end of the day, you're gonna say, and guys, guess what? This process shows that we can't legally pay for squat. That's what you've committed to.
Totally wrong, but go ahead.
All right, time flies when you're having fun. So I'm going to let everybody have their last word. I'm going to start with Howard.
Well, to kind of build on that.
Wrap it
Okay, it doesn't get easier from here, folks. The RFP process is broke, which is why we're here. We need a better way to process projects on city land through the city, the way we do it. What we're doing wrong right now is we're using the RFP to come up with a vision, to come up with a plan, and then do the implementation, when the RFP process should be part of the implementation to get things built process. So we got to fix our RFP process so we can have this discussion without going to these crazy voter initiatives. Oh, and by the way, thank you. 100 years ago, there was a really crappy piece of park near San Diego downtown that had a city dump in it, and the people then, the citizens then, were able to say, let's build something great. Panama Canal is going to open. It's going to change the way we talk to each other. Well, guess what? We've changed the way we talk to each other again. It's a good time for us to think and aspire for a better future that will build for the next 100 years, not the next 10 years.
Let the record show he held up a Voice San Diego article. FYI. All right, go with Marcella, Jack, Laura, and then Nick. Marcella?
My thing is just read the facts. Don't be fooled by props and a cute little bingo card. Read the facts. It's just the facts that Measure G is a ghost.
I would just ask you to think about the future of the city. Think about the future of San Diego State University, a 120-year institution in this community that needs to grow and needs to help the next generations get educated and be successful in our workforce. Think about all of these endorsements. Every organized group that has studied this in San Diego has voted to oppose that E and support G. And we are the economic engine in the community along with UCSD. $5.7 billion a year in economic impact. Forget about all his tax numbers. Think about the overall impact that a university like San Diego State and UCSD has on this region and the opportunities it will give to future generations of San Diegans to get a college education.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree with Jack more. We have a roadmap for this. It was the institution of UCSD that has created Sereno Mesa, that has created biotech companies and technology companies and innovators, and that is because we partnered, and they gave that land away, and that's not what SDSU is asking for. This is about who do you trust. Do you trust SDSU, an institution who has been around for more than 100 years, or do you trust folks that are in it to find an undervalued asset and write a 3,000-page initiative to ensure that that asset remains undervalued in terms of the price that they pay, and also that it remains undervalued in terms of the investments in infrastructure, traffic, and parks that they will have to make? So it really is a question of who do you trust. And so, because I know it's complicated and it's hard, but it's about the future of San Diego and where you want to put your tax dollars and your investment, your land, because land is tax dollars, and it's about who you trust. Thanks.
Nick?
Well, this is fun. So I think the point about trust is an interesting one. Do you trust the details that we've put forward? Do you trust the city attorney who says the SDSUS initiative, which Laura's clients are backing and Jack is backing, won't build a park, won't build a stadium, or doesn't require them to? Trust is a loose term. What I do have confidence in is that people at the end of the day can have a couple of different views. There are some people out there who say, reasonably, higher education at all costs. I don't care if it costs my schools hundreds of millions of dollars through K through 12. I don't care if it costs the city $200 million bucks. I don't care if a lot of that money goes to the private developers that are backing SDSU West. I don't care if the university is better served for 120 years from now that way. Okay. Reasonable people can think that. I don't, for what it's worth. I don't understand a fiduciary for students who says, hey, I'm going to put the students on the hook for an extra $150 million worth of debt to help my private developer on that site. I don't understand that. That is what you're choosing between here. You're choosing between a plan in SDSU West that puts the students on the hook for an extra $150 million worth of debt. Long term, what gives to them, the university, exactly the same opportunities that SoccerCity does. You haven't heard a single answer today for what are we building on the site that doesn't meet the needs. The difference with SoccerCity, we're $200 million better for the city. We're hundreds of millions of dollars better for the schools. And actually, we're going to do something sooner than the next 20 years worth of planning. Like, it's time to finally do something with what is the largest parking lot west of the Mississippi and the asset that y'all own.
Y'all. Thank you. If you are interested in the article that Jack cited about just how close San Diego State got to a deal with SoccerCity, I wrote that. It's at Voice of San Diego. You can just search that.
Your longest article.
It was my longest ever. So thank you to all the panelists for this. I thought it was good, everybody.
Thank you, Voice of San Diego and Scott.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, University of San Diego.
And thank you to the University of San Diego. And it takes a lot to handle debates like this, so please give them a round of applause.